Happy Thursday. Welcome to Dark Horse Paranormal. I am your host, Chris Carr.
And I am Kristen Johnson.
Happy Thirsty Thursday. Cheers to you, our friends. We're having energy drinks and Diet Coke tonight, so we're going to talk a lot. This should be fun. How are you guys? What's going on? Don't worry, I don't really expect you to answer that in real time or anything. But we want to say happy birthday to Anna Marie Young. Yes. Happy birthday. I hope you had a good birthday this week. And of course, any of our other friends that may have had a birthday, if we forgot you. What's going on, Bob Burnell? How are you doing? Joe Fox, love the intro. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Carol and Ann and all you beautiful people. Well, we're having a nice Thursday. We just finished up some chicken sandwiches. yeah. And hello. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to get right to business because I really don't have a lot of jokes worked out or anything tonight. I think I
used that button last night.
We used them all up last night on Greg Koss's When Spirits Connect show. And we were doing Estes method. I think some of you guys saw that. And that was pretty fun. Some pretty interesting stuff with Greg and Emmy and Diana. That was good. That was good stuff. We totally support that show and all the wonderful shows out there in internet land. And we thank you guys for supporting them too.
Yes, thank you.
So let me tell you about our guest. She's been on before, but not in a while. We just figured out she's come out with like 3, maybe 4 books since we last talked to her. And it was only like, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago. She's very prolific and a wonderful author. Her name is Anna Marie Manalo. She's a Filipina-American, born and raised in suburban San Juan, an hour north of metropolitan Manila. During her childhood, her neighborhood was an active hotspot for ghosts, apparitions, and other entities. These experiences led her interest into the supernatural after her father's tragic death from a demonic infestation in their home. Anna is an author of several paranormal suspense memoirs and anthologies. She specializes in hauntings brought about by catastrophic events such as World War II, acts of human violence, odd and strange entities that appear in remote, isolated, or abandoned places, or beings created by human thought called Tulpas. A very interesting subject in and of itself, for sure. Anna believes that the entities that appear in Filipino folklore have been on Earth eons before the appearance of human civilization. Mm-hmm. And we applaud that thought as well. Absolutely. I think we might start there. A therapist by profession, Anna began writing in her spare time as a screenwriter. She has placed in several screenplay competitions for her highly atmospheric and suspenseful scripts. Now an author, Anna writes creative nonfiction memoirs and anthologies based on first-person accounts garnered from people she has interviewed all over the world as a travel photographer and antique collector. Anna's books are all highly rated and available on Amazon, as well as the website that's taken across the bottom, AnnaMariaManaloAuthor.com. And let's just bring a rat on. Get right to things. I can't hold back anymore. Hello, Anna. How are you?
Hi, it's good to be here.
It's great to have you
again. Yes.
We certainly enjoyed talking to you the last time you were on the show, and we were trying to figure out when that was before we went on live, and it had to be at least 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. It's been a little while because you've got all these new books, including Infernal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually was on when you had Haunted Heirlooms. And it's interesting that now I'm going to bring up a new release, which is actually picking up where Haunted Heirlooms left off.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's
going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Like we had mentioned, we liked Haunted Heirlooms, and it hit close to home for us because our parents were antique dealers, and we grew up with antiques all around us at all times. So it's such a fascinating area where you've got all this history and energy maybe going into these objects, that are maybe in your house for 6 months, maybe a week, maybe years.
You bet.
and can certainly contain your consciousness. Now, you had some childhood experiences there, as we saw in your bio, that maybe brought you around. Did you want to talk a little bit about that before we get into the other things?
Well, actually, when I published the second edition of my first book, I made some additions, some more extra information in there that I didn't put in the first edition. I had a lot of concerns about publicizing what happened to my family personally. So I wrote that book in the third person. It's called Portal, A Lifetime of Paranormal Experiences. That was something that originally came out back in 2017. And I penned it because I had so many cases, for one, that came from my stint as a MUFON investigator. This goes back in my salad days, and there were a lot of cases that never made it to the MUFON website. Quite a few of them are pretty terrifying. A lot of them are abductions. But on top of that, what I did was I mixed in all kinds of experiences I had as a child. And that's how I began that book. I actually began the first half of the book talking about demonic infestation. And this is a toss-up. Some people say, no, it's not demonic, it's something else. And I'll tell you this, Chris and Kristen. When I was watching the Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere, I actually had to walk out of the movie theater the first time I saw it. I saw it a couple of times. It really triggered in me something that was incredibly familiar emotionally. And I finally had to unravel that onion that I had been hiding for a very long time. The fact that I was involved in an infestation. I was very much unaware of a lot of things that were going on because when it began, I was only 2 years old. But finally, with all the passing of time, relatives of mine, including my mother, started sharing with me exactly what has happened in that little apartment, which is actually a pretty remote hamlet of San Juan. It's probably now bustling in a much larger town. But back then, you know, it was very isolated. It was very quiet. And it revolved around a certain tree. And some people to this day tell me, no, it's not demonic. That was Mothman that he saw. And whatever reason, it stayed around for several months. And finally, he committed suicide. He figured that was the only way he could protect his family was for the creature to pursue him into the nether life.
Wow.
So it was a very tragic beginning. I mean, I talk about it matter of fact, but so that's how I started. My interest all began because of that. And uncannily, my father was also a writer. He was actually a writer by profession, whereas I'm really just beginning to do that after my early retirement. But he spent a lot of time at the keyboard sitting in a room facing a huge window. And that's when he met this creature.
And how did he describe the creature? You compared it to Mothman. Or?
Well, I've never actually, not that I consciously recall ever seen it, but maybe perhaps I did. I don't know. I was very much a small child at the time, being age 2, but his descriptions to my mother, and my mother actually saw it eventually after several months. She walked into the room and saw it hanging at the window. It had the face, first it had the wingspan and the look of a huge bat with the leather wings, kind of like Jeepers Creepers.
Oh, man.
So you could just imagine. I don't know what I would do if I saw something like that. And then it had a face of a goat, according to her. It had that long goatee and the proverbial horns on the top of its head. And then she said it resembled a cross between a goat and the eyes of a cow, if you could picture that.
Yeah.
Sounds like some of the women I was meeting before Kristen came along.
My button. That's terrible.
Oh my God. Who will remain nameless?
Yes, of course.
So funny.
Yeah.
But no,
That
that's
sounds
really
like Bale. Is
frightening.
it Bale? Bao? How do you say that? It looks like it's the what is it? Goetia? You know, the demon.
The 72 demons of the
Yeah.
Goetia? Oh, Baal. You're
Yeah.
thinking about Baal.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
That's kind of what popped in my mind when you had said that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that gives me the shivers.
Yeah, Bob says Jersey Devil.
Jersey Devil. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Or witch. There's a witch involved with the Jersey Devil stories too.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
And this creature is huge. So if you picture Mothman, you can't really see it close up in that film, but I thought Jeepers Creepers had a better depiction of how big it was. I mean, it was taller than an average person, from what I recall. And my mother, being my mother, described how the wingspan went from one end of the window to the other, and the window took up the entire one side of the room. So that's probably in excess of 9 feet.
Wow.
From wingtip to wingtip.
Yeah, that's a fearsome creature indeed. Now,
Yeah.
was there a known entity in the town? Did other people talk about the entity too? And did they have a name for it?
No one has ever seen anything like it. It's a very Roman Catholic nation. I'd say 99% of the people there are very religious. So it's very taboo to talk about. They did not allow my father to be buried, actually, or even have a mass performed for him inside the church because of the nature of the death. But one of the things that the priests were terrified to do was come in and actually bless the dwelling. So we fled. Wow. We left. Within a week, we were out of there. But the interesting part about this, Chris, is that none of the neighbors ever witnessed anything. It was exclusively my father that was being visited upon.
Wow. So it was, they wanted him. They wanted him to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is
they
something.
sought him out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that seems to be like how possession kind of works, right? You start in those different stages, like an infestation, and then it goes into other levels.
Obsession. And then eventually it takes, what I think happens too is an isolation, because he really couldn't explain to people what he was seeing. And it wasn't until much later, several months later, when my mother just walked in and saw it. But at that point, the place was feeling very, I guess, ominous is the word. I was told I was always crying in the bedroom next door because I could sense something was wrong. I can't even imagine, even to this day. And I visited it, by the way, you guys. I visited that spot, I would say probably now 15 years back. I actually went there with an uncle, with my husband. My husband was terrified after I told him. And the apartment was in such a way where it was like a row home. There was about 8 of them. And the actual unit was somewhere in the middle. So we walked up inside the driveway and walked up to the unit and looked up. And there was a gentleman there buying eggs. He was just walking back from somewhere. And he wondered, because my uncle was so excited, reliving and retelling what had happened when he had discovered my father. And he was gesturing and, explaining what happened. And the guy just stood there, holding a dozen eggs in his hand. And he dropped them in the process of listening because he couldn't believe what he was hearing.
Wow.
Do you think having that kind of experience may have led to, well, I'm sure it led to your interest in this sort of thing and phenomena and want to explain it. And we always say most of our guests have had childhood experiences, and as adults they have some interest in this sort of thing, into the paranormal, or it could be UFOs, whatever it is, because of those experiences. And it's almost all of them. So certainly the case with you, I'm sure. Has it led to any kind of psychic ability?
That's a good question. That's a very original question. No one's ever asked me that before. Some people have told me that I tend to be very sensitive to seeing entities that other people might not see.
Mhm.
An aunt who has already passed a long time ago used to tell me that. Sometimes people will walk in and they haven't asked a question yet. I'm already responding to their question. That's not happening here right now, by the way. But
Yeah.
I have a certain sensitivity, is what I've been told. But flat out, I don't think I have anything beyond that.
Well, and it's interesting. Sometimes those kind of experiences, to be so close to it, it seems to rub off, and it's been shown to be true in alien abduction phenomena. The abductees tend to come away with what they call a contact modality, where they have this sort of new enhanced sense of some kind of psychic power. It might be telepathy or one of the clairs. It might be lucid dreaming, things of that nature. But it seems to increase with the more visitations and somehow be caused by it. And we think a lot of that phenomena is extremely related, if not the same phenomena, under different labels,
It could be.
Well,
You mentioned you worked with MUFON for a number
yes.
of years. What was your experience with that? Did you get to
Well,
see the UFOs? Or
to reply to your previous observation, you hit it right on the head, because the book before the Infernal, which is called Night Visitants, had to do with a UFO abductee. And the observations you make about the fact that they tend to be more sentient, actually being very precognitive, is true. I interviewed this woman. Let me just tell you a little bit of that before I answer your current question.
Sure.
There is a gentleman by the name of Tom Conwell, who's a ufologist, and he's probably listening tonight. He's a wonderful friend. I've known him for about 4 or 5 years now. During the pandemic, he and I would contact each other and talk. He believed in meditation to allay the anxiety that, the pandemic was bringing on. And in one of our phone calls, he happened to mention that he was collecting questionnaires from UFO abductees. And he went on to talk a little bit about the kind of data he was getting. He's a pattern researcher, so he really is more, whereas I'm the right side of the brain, he's the left side of the brain. One of the abductees, who responded very briefly to a questionnaire, piqued his interest, and he contacted her. To make a long story short, it evolved into a book called The Night Visitants, where I write about not just Tom's very prosaic dreams, but also this woman whose actual life has been punctuated by nothing but one encounter after another. And the nature of it is so opposite to the benevolent encounters that Tom encounters during the evening and during the day, that I was just presented with an astounding contrast between two different kinds of visitations from two very unassuming and humble people. So yes, in answer to your first observation, definitely they do end up becoming pretty psychic. They have certain abilities that definitely allow them to forecast what is going to happen and how someone actually feels.
It's so interesting. And you have to wonder if, like, maybe those childhood experiences, maybe even repressed ones, could have led to some of that phenomena and those abilities later in life. in the same way that the abductees do report. We've
Mhm.
talked to quite a few of them, and a lot of times they are like that lifelong experiencer thing. It's not a one-time thing. It's
No.
like they come back, and they don't know when, they don't know why, but at some point they always come back.
It happens during the day, happens when they're riding their bikes, when they're doing, their motorcycles, anything.
Yeah. Terry Lovelace
Yes.
riding a motorcycle, just spaces out and ends up in a ditch and loses 6 hours.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Crazy.
doesn't know where he went.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the sad part about it, I think, is that in the case of this woman, she felt trapped. This started when she was just a small kid. And, somehow it marked her. That was her perception, that of all the family members that was living in that house, she somehow was the one that was marked. And she definitely was. She's now in her 70s. She won't come forward because she lives in a small town. I had to obscure her location. I had to change her name. But that book is pretty much 95% true. It's probably the most terrifying book I've written to date. I think one of the things that astounded me is how I personally also was touched by the visitations that she had. But, that's a story for a different show. I could go on and on about that.
Sure. That's one of the books that came out since we talked to Night Visitants. And I think Unholy Structure was another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was about a mansion that refused to be restored. And that's the thing that goes on a lot. Mm-hmm. We were just in a mansion, quite literally, last weekend for an investigation. It's the Wheeler Mansion in Orange, Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And it's really this big restoration project. One time it become run down and the owner didn't take care of it. The roof collapsed. The tree was growing through the middle of the thing, and just crazy stuff.
I would have left the tree there. That's the first thing I said.
Right? Built it around the tree.
Yeah,
right inside the house.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be neat. But a beautiful place. And
yeah,
I don't know how, maybe because of such high financial stakes in these situations where you have things like mansions and money can fluctuate, that they fall into disrepair. But it seems like they're always trying to repair some of these places. Was that true of that mansion?
Well, this mansion, from what I understand, has changed hands about 4 times at this point. As a matter of fact, while I was writing the book, I was encouraging the investigator, who is John Curley. He's the co-founder of Harrisburg Area Paranormal. And he said, well, Anna, we have a little technical problem with that because while you were writing the book, the owner has given up trying to get it renovated once again and sold it to someone else. So they were the investigating team that was brought in to find out why all these people, these construction crews, were walking out. They were actually even working overtime Saturday and some people Sunday to meet a deadline because it was going to be a beautiful inn. I mean, it was talking about antiques, there were still antique furniture inside the house. And some of them ended up actually being inhabited or attached to something. But it was a very grand in its day. It used to be the very first time, actually, when it was built, it was an inn. And apparently a lot of tragedies and a lot of violence happened in there. There was a young girl who was abducted. There was a gentleman who made her disappear. We don't know what happened to her, but we did see the ghost later on. They encountered a very evil entity that was like a smoke or soot, kind of like almost effervescing up the stairwell into the attic. And in the attic, there's a tub. And depending who's looking at it, it could have blood or dried blood in the bottom, or sometimes it appears as just pearl clean. So, and then there's, I mean, we got a mishmash of everything in there. And it was one of those things where he would call me and say, I forgot to tell you what happened to this guy who was the electrician. Do you have a few minutes? And I'll say, okay. And it ended up being an hour conversation on the phone. And then I added that on. And then a few days later, there's something else that's happening right now. So this was a very heavily infested area. When I say area, it's not just the building. It's also the back, the side yard. And it was a few yards from a cemetery that was in disrepair. And there was also activity in the cemetery.
Maybe it's something about the land itself.
Well, that's what I was going to ask her. If it may be one of the spirits or whoever was the owner, the first owner, was like this one. We think because it's getting repaired that the spirits that are inhabiting the area are not happy with it.
I think so.
Just a few times. So I was wondering if it was that or if the land itself.
Yeah, it could be things in the land too, like
as well.
High mineral content of some kind, maybe crystals, maybe limestone, you know. Carol wanted to know if you were still working with MUFON.
No, I actually left MUFON after I was involved with the STAR team. So that was around that time, I believe, when I'm trying to remember his name now. Bigelow purchased the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
So shortly after that, my involvement stopped, and I had moved on to actually writing screenplays at that point.
I see. And what do you think of Skinwalker Ranch? Does it have commonality with some of the other places you've
you would not find me, Chris, 100 feet or 100 yards from Skinwalker Ranch. That place just really terrifies me. From the very first book I picked up with Colm Kelleher, God bless him. And then now I know there was a sequel, the one that involved the Pentagon. To this day, I don't know why they bother with that ranch. I really don't. I mean, it's like, don't you get it? It's just totally evil.
Yeah. They were finding like werewolves, like really different sort of things at one point, and then it seemed to be all aliens, and I don't know,
portals and things like that, and
varied and interesting reports and cattle mutilations as well. And right, yeah.
What creeps me out is that it also followed some of the government people home, followed them. They were affected when they got home, and they can't explain what was happening to them. The only thing they had in common was that they spent an overnight, I think, or two at Skinwalker Ranch. Now that to me borders on, that's enough. There's too many flags there to say leave it alone completely.
When people say Skinwalker, they relate to the natives that live there at the Utah Basin. And Skinwalker in, I think it's Navajo, it translates not to a witch is what people think, but it's to their, like, it's about their spirit inside themselves. If they do something for their spirit guide, instead of going up and doing like growing up and doing like everything they need to do step by step to get out to that point, to where the other natives, Navajos, go for soul searching and guide searching. These witches that they call them, the skinwalkers, have not, and they actually did it sporadically and just like killed part of their family, and then they were ousted off, and that's why they call them that. They wanted to take they wanted to take a better direct approach, and yet killed their family members, and that's why they sent them off and expelled them from them, and that's basically called the witch, the skinwalker. That's what that's all about. But a lot of people just think they're creepy crawlies, and that's not what it is at all.
Shapeshifters, I think, is like the first, right?
The spirit animal. But
yeah, fascinating stuff. Fascinating. So Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess I don't think any of us are going camping there anytime soon. We're probably okay.
I'd like
I'm
to.
just astounded they even have a series. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
Kristen, I
I'd
interrupted
like
you.
to go to there. I would like to go at least one time, just to feel, just to see if anything happens or if anything at all. I don't know if they really do exist out there. I don't know why Bob Bigelow sold it.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't know. I don't know how the new
yeah,
guys do.
I'm not sure that the new guy I believe is the one that is running the show
Yeah, the latest
on
show is out
TV.
there.
Mm-hmm.
He's on it,
Hmm.
I think, occasionally. But we're not big TV watchers, but we watch a thing or two on
Yeah,
YouTube.
I'm not either.
So.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
So your latest book is called The Infernal, and just I'll read a little bit from the description because something about this really caught my eye. It was based on the case of a 12-year-old girl who invited an entity that could travel for thousands of miles. She was a witch, a black witch. What she had sketched from a book had come to life. And this idea of drawing an entity from thousands of miles rings true with us because we know that there just doesn't seem to be any kind of time or space
Right.
on the other side. These entities have identified themselves for us in all sorts of places, just far from each other, with no, seemingly no issue with getting around. Like you don't need a car if you're an
No.
haunted
Spirit
entity.
or entity.
A
Yeah.
scary entity in that case, right? So we had a story of a kind of an attachment like that. It just seemed to not matter where we went; it was always
Mhm.
there. So is this a little like this little girl? She's able to attract entities
Well,
from
this started
afar?
way back when I wrote Haunted Heirlooms. I had two college friends I kept in touch with. One of them, you mentioned Rhode Island. There was an antique shop that was owned by his parents. He went to school with me, actually graduated a year after I did. But during that time when they were there, courtesy of me, because of a haunted chair that I brought into their beach house, they had to break the lease on the beach house, and they ended up looking for a house to rent. There was three of them, three guys. One stumbled upon a beautiful home that was in an upscale neighborhood. I won't name the name of the town, but it's off of the Metro North, the train. And they were really astounded to find out that, first of all, the house came very cheap, of course, as these houses go. They usually aren't, but they could afford it because they're three college students and basically were working part-time jobs. The other thing that was unusual about it was that the landlady happened to be one of my classmates' very lifelong antique collector and used to frequent his parents' antique shop. So, knowing her, being familiar with her, he trusted her. So, when it was available, they signed on to a lease, and it was a beautiful Victorian. I haven't been to the area in a while. I don't know what's happened to the Victorian. I changed the names of all the people involved. But after he graduated years later, we talked again, and then I put their story in Haunted Heirlooms. And then later on, we touched base, and I wondered what happened to you guys after you moved out of the beach house. And they told me. So that resulted in the book, The Infernal. One of the things that is very terrifying about this is that there is a book out there. It's a very rare book. This is the part that is not controllable. There are copies of this rare book, and it is a dictionary of demons. There were 6 editions of this book. The 6th edition came with illustrations, sketches, very detailed sketches done by a Frenchman. The book itself was authored by a Frenchman. It started in the 16th century. But the final edition had these I would say about maybe 30 sketches, very detailed sketches of every single demon known to mankind. This girl, who is the centerpiece of this story, when it started, she was only 12 years old. And you guys already know, being investigators, when you're 12 years old, there's a lot of emotions flying out there. Some of those emotions involve feelings of rejection, isolation, and downright rage, pure anger. This girl was experiencing all of that because of all the kinds of things she was encountering with her own family. She happened to come upon this book, this dictionary of demons, in a public library of all places. And she began, because she was a talented artist, she began sketching from that book. So that's how it begins.
So she begins drawing, and by drawing that and focusing her intent on these demons, they start to materialize. They're drawn to her.
Well, that is the question for the reader, Chris, is there are two sides to the coin possible with this, and I'm not giving it away.
Yeah, we don't want to know the end. I don't want to give the book away, but yeah,
we don't know.
We smell what you're cooking with that, though. Right?
Yeah.
No,
so one person who read it and reviewed the book thought it was definitely demonic, because she was an investigator, and one of the things she heard was this click, 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 click. It clicked, and it happens all throughout the book. Anytime the girl was present, and even after she was no longer around, you would hear this, almost like someone clicking, putting their tongue on the roof of their mouth.
Okay.
And she said that that was one of the signs of a presence. I mean, I'm just going by what she's telling me. I've never heard that happen. So in the case of this situation, that was something they told me, the landlady had told them, that even after they left the house, she would hear that clicking in the empty spaces of the house.
Damn.
And she didn't know where that was coming from. The girl also used the attic. She had two of her friends who were also middle school age. They would sit with candles on the floor, and they would actually try to summon whatever she drew, whatever she sketched. In what fashion, they don't know, because there's only one that's, as far as we know, still around. One passed away, tragically.
Jeepers.
Really?
Do you think it was because of that?
Was it related to the events?
Yeah, related.
Maybe.
Could be.
Could be.
No, it's kind of tragic and terrible.
It might not hold up in court, but maybe it happened that way. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Or here's the alternative reason. And I'm willing to entertain both, like I did with night visitants. You mentioned Tulpas.
Yes.
So could it be possible that at some point she became the embodiment of just pure rage? And these two that were friends of hers, for anybody who picks up and reads the book, there's two other friends there that are the same age. Could they also be so angry that they were able to create something
So terrible.
That
so
takes on a life of its own and has its own consciousness. An egregore, a tulpa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are people that intentionally make egregores. You know, it's a thing. You can do it. It takes a lot of emotion, and having 3 kids and one just so highly emotional. Maybe
going through puberty at that time, and a lot of people.
There's probably a lot of these things out there. Really,
the
you know,
poltergeists of children going through puberty. So.
Yeah.
3 of them, and then sitting down trying doing that. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So there's 2 different explanations. It just depends on how you read it. Obviously, I won't give it all away, but
no, it sounds super interesting. I like that. I'm fascinated with the book. I mean, I like grimoires. It's a wonderful age that we live in now, that there are so many books that are available, you know, in some kind of print that, you know, were very, very hard to come by, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Including things like grimoires from the Middle Ages and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys if you ever came across that.
I don't know if we come across that exact one, but there are books like that, you know, certainly.
Is it the Red Book? Is that what we're talking about? The Red Book?
I think it depends on the edition.
Grimoire Vernum, and there's quite a few, but certainly a lot of times they contain some kind of artwork. Sometimes they're copied, you know, and there'll be one in France and it's slightly different than the one they found in Italy, that sort of thing. And they're just handwritten books.
Because they're translating.
Somebody would, you know, get together with somebody, they would copy the book and then probably put their own notes in it, because they were books of sorcery and they're about conjuration of these kind of spirits and intentionally bringing them about to do their bidding. So long as I guess they do that bidding, maybe we're all right.
Right.
See, it's creepy because somehow this book also moves. It disappeared at one point, reappeared somewhere else, and it just baffled these 3 students, because it was just making them so miserable, so edgy, so jumpy. And it all started just because a neighbor's dog, and not just because I have 2 dogs myself, I love them, but it all began when one of the students hit a dog by accident on the road.
Jeez.
Oh, really? Was it the neighbor's dog? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was just the catalyst, it seemed.
Did they know? Did the neighbor know?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
They were a good person and brought the dog over. Sometimes those things happen and nobody knows.
Yeah, hormones is right. Someone commented. Really bad in this case.
Yeah, super hormones. Our middle school should be just like full of entities walking around and things flying around.
Look, this is one of those things. It's almost like, you know, what you shouldn't be doing. And, you know, when I watch those shows that talk about, you know, people playing with the Ouija boards, I almost want to put a disclaimer in front. Please do not try this at home. Do not get a copy of this book or try to pursue getting a copy of it in the public library and playing with it.
Right. Oh, people do. You know, I don't know. I think it's just like the way of the setting their intention. You know, intention does seem to lead to manifestation. And then sometimes you can open doors, right? Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything particularly, you know, and people will throw rocks at me for this, evil about the board itself. You know, it is just cardboard. It's a design. It's not particularly, it's cool looking. But then again, how often do you hear the story?
Right.
You know, oh, my nephew got possessed, had to spin it around.
I don't think it's the cardboard itself as what you want to come out of it, because I mean it and then I've been told if you ever come across one and you used it, you're supposed to close it. I don't
Mm.
know if that's true or not. You have to say goodbye to it or whatever. You just don't simply leave it open.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't rip it. You don't burn it. You don't do any of that kind of stuff. But to me, it's what you intend to do with it. Just like with what these girls did. Well, this two girls and boy with a book, and the way they came about, it was almost like they were praying to these things, is the impression I got from the telling. That there's a lot of involvement with time and energy trying to get something to show up.
Right.
There it is, the intention.
Right.
Yeah.
Intent
Yeah.
leading to manifestation.
Exactly, Nicole.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that is a thing. And you think, I know you wrote about World War II as well. One of the things we wanted to talk about was like battlegrounds in general. A lot of paranormal investigators and researchers will go to places like Gettysburg and these sites of
Yeah.
mass death. And do you think that that really does leave an imprint when you're on those lands?
Oh yeah, you definitely get the energy of whatever was there. It's interesting. I've never been to Gettysburg, but I have been at Penhurst. And as you well know, there was a lot of people there who were isolated, neglected,
Terrible.
even, yeah, it's just the lives that they were forced to lead because they were mentally ill. And
Very
when you walk in,
Mhm.
what's that?
I said it was more trauma to them as well as already being, upset.
Yes.
They're very just traumatized by all the things that they're doing to them.
Yes. And
The
I
doctor.
think you can feel that kind of like energy, the oppressiveness of it, the loneliness, the sense of hopelessness. It telegraphed to me. And, despite the fact that you had all this music going on and all these people to kind of mute the negative energy, you could still kind of like feel that lingering in the background. I would not want to be there alone in any of those buildings. We were in the Devon building, and there was a couple of people there who were celebrities that were talking, and there was a line of people. But once they emptied out, and it was just basically us vendors, there was a sense of like an almost draining kind of an energy. So I could just imagine like an actual battlefield, what that would feel like. In the one book that I wrote, I mean, this woman was telling me just the way it felt as she was walking through the isolated spots in the forest where people were murdered, and how things were being reenacted for her benefit. And she didn't even realize they were reenactments. They were so real to her as they were so real to her father, who was also fleeing. It was almost like these people were flesh and blood until suddenly they just simply disappear.
So the spirits were reenacting the events before.
Like a
Right?
residual.
Yeah, like a residual haunting, sort of just reliving the same thing over and over.
Over and over again.
All the fear, terror, pure terror
Trauma.
that would go into the land.
Yeah, I don't.
There was one. Yeah, it's kind of tragic. It's one of those things where you kind of wonder eventually if they would move on, or if that residual energy would just remain there forever. I mean, there is the residual kind, and then there's the ones that are active hauntings. And if those people are trapped there forever, I mean, someone needs to, I guess, send them up, send them to the light.
Yeah. Help them move on.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, some part of one soul, I think, can just be there, tend to be a multi-part soul. And maybe part of them did ascend, but another part just stayed behind, reliving that over and over.
I believe so. I really do. And I think it's almost like they're trying to figure out a way to tell the world don't do this. This is what happened to us. And then another part of them is almost like by reliving it, they're letting go a little bit at a time. At least that's my interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob Burnell notes, I've heard of living people creating a residual imprint. And we think that's true too. I think people do that all the time. If you walk into a party and everybody's happy, isn't there just a feeling about that room? Just walking in before you even know all that's going on, you feel better. If you walk into a funeral or a place where people are grieving, there's an energy in that air, and you just know instantly, wow, something bad happened.
Yeah.
It's natural to feel that. It's like the psychic ability. It's like when you get a text or your phone rings and you know who it is before you answer it. That's a psychic phenomena that most people experience at some point. Maybe not every call, but once in a while, you just know.
Right.
Like, oh, there's Kristen.
That's funny.
I recently walked into a room, and this was a barn. I was there with a friend. We were looking at antiques, actually.
Nice.
And we walked into a particular room, and it had a string of lights. It had all kinds of paintings on the walls. And I don't know whether it was a particular object, a set of objects, or the paintings. The first thing my friend remarked was, "My gosh, this room is just so light. It's just so happy," she said. And we don't know. And then the owner came around and we told her. And she said, yeah, this barn has been here for over 100 years. It was built in 1853. And it's always been a happy room.
Mm-hmm. A happy place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could have been a place where people celebrated. Nothing bad happened. And they had animals underneath. We were like on the second or third floor of the barn. And they had sheep and all kinds of animals underneath them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's happy.
Some places are like that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Wilson Castle, which is one of those kind of mansion-like places that's always being renovated. They're always working. They raise money for it, but it's gorgeous. Now, all original furnishings in this, and there's this one room with like kind of skylights in it.
The gallery.
And they have
favorite.
art. Yeah, they have art on the walls and really beautiful, nice art room. And there is just such a good feeling in that room. Each time we've been there, we always remark on it.
It's
like
very happy.
as soon as you walk in, it just, you just get a good feeling.
Yeah, lifts you up.
Yes.
Yeah.
He made it for his wife, and it has skylights and everything on it coming down. It's beautiful, and all the artwork and busts and things. So beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could tell he made it in such a way that he was very happy to have been able to create that for her.
Yes.
Yeah. Total contrast. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It was a guy that had contributed to AM radio and the advent of AM radio stations that built the house originally, I believe.
Johnson?
I think so. I forget.
Of course.
We haven't been in a while, but a nice location.
So Nicole asked.
What are your thoughts about time slips?
Jeez. That's a good question. A lot of people who are abducted have missing time. Speaking of time slips, they think that they were right there, and then the next thing you know, it's 4 hours later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an odd thing. Time is an odd thing. You mentioned earlier that we think for spirits there really isn't much of a sense of time.
Linear, right.
And like we experience it in this very linear fashion as mere mortals, right, on the mortal coil. But they do not seemingly have that. And maybe that's part of what those experiences are like. You're touching upon that plane, that other reality that's right there around us.
Did I tell you about an account that I got? I think I put this in the very first book. And I might have mentioned it to you in an earlier show, but I'm not sure. Two gentlemen were going home, and they were crossing from New Jersey back to Pennsylvania. And as they crossed the bridge, they decided they would go for drinks before they actually went home. They were carpooling. So the one gentleman says, okay, well, let's stop over here. And they stopped, parked the car. And at the time, the parking lot was crowded. And so the one gentleman says, let me run in, while you're parking the car. And he runs in, gets inside the inn. It was an inn with, a bar attached to it and a restaurant. The other gentleman follows, and then he said, hang on, I want to show you some pictures of my new baby, because he had a family. Dashes back to the car, opens the back door, goes into his briefcase to get these pictures. As he comes up to close the door, the entire parking lot is empty. Empty.
Wow.
He comes back. He goes towards the inn. The restaurant is now closed, and the friend couldn't find him.
Wow.
Couldn't find him. He went in there. The friend was gone. So finally, he calls him on his cell phone. He said, what happened to you? I went to get pictures. What happened? Well, he said, it's 1:00 in the morning. I went looking all over for you. Your car was gone. You left me. I had to get a ride.
So just from the bar to his car. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all he remembers.
That's all.
That's what he experienced. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
He
interesting.
came out to the parking lot. It was filled with cars. Dusk was just starting to, because it was the end of the workday. So it was like, 5:30? He goes in to dig into the briefcase. He comes out, closes the door. There's nobody in the parking lot but him. And it's just the street lights from the parking lot.
Wow.
Yeah. And you look into the string theory, right? The theoretical physics. That's where it starts to change when you get beyond your 4th dimension, when you get into these 5th dimension, 6th, and I think they go, depending on what model of string theory you follow, it's almost 20, but I think the average is 13. I don't know. I had this down a few months ago. We were looking at it.
13,
Yeah, looking at 13, and time is what changes, and the ability to go back in time, to be in different places, and that kind of plays into what Carol Garcia asked us. She said, what do you think about being in 2 places at the same time while awake? And in that string theory, you can start to have multiple timelines, meaning your consciousness proceeds in 2 different realities, at the same time. So I think in quantum physics, they call that bilocation. Where the effect of one molecule can affect or a particle can affect another particle, a galaxy away. And maybe that plays a role in this paranormal stuff. What do you think?
Well, in religious doctrine, I don't know if you're familiar with Saint Pio, Padre Pio, he was known in his lifetime, who passed away in 1968. He was a stigmatist. He had these marks on him from the cross, which they did not heal, but they were not painful. But one of the things that they found out about him as they, went about trying to see whether he would qualify to become a saint was that he was seen several times by different people being in 2 places at the same time. He was both at the monastery and he was in another town at the same time.
Wow.
It's very interesting because that makes me think of a doppelganger, how people call doppelgangers, and instead of being in 2 places at once, it's actually a mimic of, or a clone or whatever of yourself. It's very
right. Oh, we were talking about that recently, her and
So-
I, because like people would say to us sometimes growing up, they say, you have a doppelganger? Like, I know you, or they're calling you a different name. And like, I know somebody looks just like you.
Yeah.
And I'd always kind of, it's like, wow, it's a little freaky to hear, especially when you're younger, right?
Yeah, it is. And see them as well.
Yeah, and see them. You saw yours.
I saw mine.
That's right.
And I was pregnant and we could not stop looking at each other. We looked exactly alike. I'm like, oh my God. So I walked up to her, I said hi, and I said, this is what you're going to look like when you're pregnant. when you're almost 9 months
Oh,
pregnant. Yeah. It was really bizarre to look at.
Yeah,
So
she
they
was a
say so, somewhere in the universe you have a twin, and you met your twin.
Yes.
Oh
So
my.
yes, she was actually like, she looked just like me, not family, but
and other people had
Yeah.
said this, like
yes,
you were
their own
aware of
family.
this person because you lived
Yeah.
close enough.
Lisa, her name is. And then I had another one named Cheryl. And I haven't seen Cheryl, I only seen Lisa, so, or vice versa. I don't know. But yeah, it was just made me think of that. The Father Pio made me think of that. And he had stigmata, right? Correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, stigmatist. Very interesting thing, and I don't think it's enough press really. People don't talk about stigmata enough, but it's frightening to think about. Is it a work of God, or is it the person's belief system is so strong that they're actually creating these physical marks on their skin and damage? There's a almost saint. In fact, she is a saint in some, I forget what country.
Is it Portugal or Canada? One of those.
Well, yeah, no, I don't think it was Canada. It might have been Portugal, but it's Marie Rose Ferron, and then she's buried a town away from here in a very interesting cemetery.
Yeah.
It's a French part of town. It's called Precious Blood, but of course it's written in French when we walk up there. And yeah, she is a saint. Elsewhere, she was considered for sainthood, and I think she died. She had a terrible illness. She was bedridden, I think, by the time she was like 22 or something.
Oh my gosh.
People would travel from around the world to see her, on a Sunday. The big crowds would gather, and, people felt that she really was touched by God. And her eyes would bleed, her hands, she had the whole thing. Amazing, but a very calm, peaceful cemetery plot where she's buried. We've been there before.
We've left
a few times.
Yeah.
Very interesting, really interesting story.
So did they document the fact that she could be a saint, or is she
Yeah,
just
but this was back in the, oh God, what year was that? Marie Rose Ferron, like I think the 30s. So it was a while ago. It wasn't like very recent. And like I said, she was young when she died. She was bedridden, but
well, it's amazing.
She used to find hidden objects for her friends.
Yes.
If the friends would purposely hide things. And, say, where did I put my keys and that kind of stuff, like as a kid, like 8 years old or something. And she would tell them where they were. So she was very gifted psychically. And,
yeah. I forget what that's called when you're able to determine where things are.
It's like remote viewing.
Yes, exactly. That is like remote viewing. It's almost like, you could tell the coordinates of things.
And she became deeply religious at a young age, and she felt that she was taking away some of the pain from Jesus by her living her life the way it was. And she was thankful and grateful for feeling that way, even though it would kill her.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
She died young.
But, she was one of the people that you'd go see if you were really sick, and, maybe you wouldn't be. She seemed to have powers.
So she healed people.
Yes.
That's why they went to see her.
Yeah. Jeez.
So 1902 to May 1936.
1936.
She passed away.
So there you go. Yeah.
36.
36.
That is.
Well, that's older than I thought. I thought she died at like 26.
No, 1936 is when she passed away.
But she was born in 1902.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes her a little older. 34.
It's interesting because around that period, they also had, and I'm trying to think of the circumstances, but there's quite a few people that the Garabin doll with the sun that was very similar to the one in Lourdes where the sun was spinning. And I think there were 3 girls or 2 girls. They were from a very poor family. It was northern Spain in a very remote region. And these things I noticed, they happened to very humble people of humble means, and they're mostly either teenagers or, as you mentioned, in case of that girl, someone in her early 20s. But they tend to be from a peasant background, as they would say. But it happened around that time, which was probably right after World War II. I mean, World War I, going into World War II. It's 3 girls. Yes, it is 3 girls. And Garabandal, if you look at the map, there's only maybe 3 or 4 streets. That's how small that town is. It's really a village.
Fascinating. Bob mentions about Marie Rose because he probably knows who that is. Yeah, I heard about her and heard she would absorb other people's illnesses with each healing, and she would become a little weaker each time.
Jeez.
So, blessing and a curse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sad.
You know, a lot of
It's
times,
kind of like
you
yeah,
get that great
laying
deal on
of
the house.
hands.
Turns out it's haunted by demons, right? I mean, it's that's why it's half price of what it should be, or something. Things can be a blessing and a curse.
Sure.
It's all perspective.
You kind of wonder, though, with these people, if they were confronted by an entity, how, when you think about how they're very benevolent, they're very giving, and they have the ability to heal. It reminds me of someone who lays hands in the Christian tradition, not
Right.
Roman Catholic, but the Christian tradition. I'm trying to think of the word now. They do that in order to try to bring about healing, just by the warmth of the hands.
Mhm.
And I think that that's what these people are doing. It's the same type of science. And when they're trying to bless someone, they do the same thing. They touch the person. But if the energy is negative, it transfers to them. And if they don't know how to funnel the energy out of their system, they become sick or they become weak.
Yeah. Anna Marie Young says Reiki, and I was just thinking that because my sister's a Reiki master, and
There you go.
she told me about how she thinks about the Reiki. Like, I don't get tired from it. We were talking about just being tired from work or whatever, because the energy isn't my energy. It just flows through me into the person. Right? So they're channeling the energy external to themselves. So it's not their own thing coming through. And, that's kind of what you're hoping for with the stigmatist, right? That you're getting God's energy through them to you, hopefully not weakening them the whole time, as Bob mentioned, because it's kind of disturbing, really.
Yeah.
That it would make her sicker and sicker.
You would think there's a way for her to purge it. To send out whatever that sickness is, as opposed to taking it in.
Right. Right. Yeah. Fascinating human behavior. So
it's strange how these words change over time. Now we call it Reiki.
Right.
Back at some point it was called laying of hands.
Laying of hands. Yes, right? I just looked it up.
And shamanic healing before that, and
yes.
Really any medicine woman at a time would, be holding and let me fix that for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Labels. That sort of thing.
I was waiting for her to say it.
Labels. That's right. Anna. Labels.
We talk about this often.
Yeah. The name changes, but it's the same stuff. It happens over and over again. So since we talked, you've done some paranormal conventions and that sort of thing. And what do you think of that scene? You must meet some interesting people.
I did meet quite a number of people. I also met people that I never expected to meet there. A woman walked up to me and told me, I heard about your books through Michelle Bellinger, whom is pretty prominent. I was flattered. It was just right out of the blue. And I said, well, thank you. I'm glad she knows about me. I certainly know about her. Um, and then there were some interesting people that walked by the booth who were paranormal investigators. And I have to give a shout out to Tom Muller and John Curley, who were the Harrisburg investigators that contributed me the story of the unholy structure here. And Brandon Hawk and Above and Below Paranormal, who I met at the Penhurst Paracon. So there were some stellar people there that I met. Also, Get Haunted was there as well. You guys probably know the gentleman that runs that. I met him for the first time. April Bussett, I met her for the first time. We were actually in the same area, sitting in the same area. And then I'm trying to remember exactly the name of the town, but I was at the Hell House Paracon. It's the first one.
Yeah. That's a big
ever.
one.
Yeah. It was actually a smaller venue because the house itself was small. So a lot of the vendors, some were inside, but mostly also outside. But it was, you could tell the house had been used over and over again for these movies. Let me tell you, but you could tell it was haunted. The feel of it, once again, probably not as intense as Penhurst. I really felt something at Penhurst, especially in the Devon building. That is not one building I would want to be anywhere near at nighttime. I shy away from things like that, which people think are strange. Here I am, I'm writing all these kinds of things, and yet I shy away from them. And I do honestly pray prayers of protection before I sit down and write these books. And periodically, I always pray before I add another chapter, because as they say, these entities, they know when you're talking about them. They know when you're interested.
That's a very good point. Yes. It is the thought. The thoughts are like an energy, and the more you think, like, that's how we had an attachment issue. We've only had a real negative thing happen to us once, and we had a hard time getting rid of it. And it was because we were obsessed. That's what we figured out. We were thinking about it all the time. The more you think about it, the more real it becomes, right?
Yes.
A little like the little girl we mentioned for Infernal. Like, that's why that struck a chord with us, because we figured out that's what was going on. It should have been obvious, but we just wanted to know what it was, what it was doing.
It had us going down rabbit holes. So
that's not good.
Every little bit of information just seemed like,
there it is,
10 other things, and
it would
you
open
just
up
never
10
quite
other
get your
doors.
finger on who it was, if it was a spirit in particular, or some amalgamation, or if the thing was alien. Now, in your bio, you talk about ancient civilizations a little bit. Do you believe that there were races of people, are human-like creatures here before people as we know it?
Well, there's the people of the land. We call them elementals. Dwarves, elves, fairies, you name them. They are the custodians of the land. They protect the integrity of nature. And increasingly these days, what's happening is we're really, for lack of a better term, creating chaos with the biodiversity around us. Our footprint is getting larger and larger. So we're infringing upon areas that we have no business being in. And in the process, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing nature rebelling. You get earthquakes, you get all kinds of imbalances in the weather. Of course, some of it is man-made as well. But the thing that comes to mind, which is the title of your thing here, Bigfoot. I mean, that guy is just minding his own business in the deep forest in the back country. And then here comes these people putting up their tents, playing their music, doing whatever. So the more you infringe on the ecosystem, the more likely you're going to encounter not just Bigfoot, but also even these imps and, I don't even know what they're called these days, but certainly these are
all of those.
Yes.
Yeah.
All those they can be Aquajis, they can be fairy folk, they can be the fae.
Yeah, they can be elves, it can be gnomes, it can be whatever.
Scandinavia is known for their elves. All cultures seem to have these kind of creatures, and they seem to live in maybe a spiritual ecosystem. And that's why we don't see them, or they're just not made of the same stuff as we are, same kind of matter, and we just don't perceive them with our very limited five senses, which isn't much. When you think about it, our brain processes information based on these sensory organs that are not 100% accurate anyways to begin with. Tries to put it together to form the picture so we can get around, so we can survive and contribute and grow plants and then eat them, or whatever it is, reproduce. But it's not much. It's really not a lot of senses. It seems perfectly feasible to me that creatures could exist with an entirely different set of senses and sensory organs. We might call them a ghost or a fairy.
And they have powers all their own. They have a lot of things that they can do insidiously to people. People undermine them, underestimate them. And the more people disrespect nature, the more they will come out and rebel.
Yes, we agree with that.
Yeah.
100%.
Nature does take care of itself
Definitely.
at some point. We probably push the boundaries of that as far as we can with our overpopulation, with our endless need for expansion, and just needing so much food. Just the food alone takes such a toll on the planet. Our quest for capitalism to be the best oil driller, or whoever it is certainly taken a toll on the planet.
Yeah.
And
all the wars that are happening.
Yeah,
absolutely, especially now. What a crazy time to live and watch the news, and to be so used to seeing bad news on the news, to not be shocked every day.
Yeah.
Just like freaking out every day. And I think most people aren't. We're used to it, and that's sad.
Yeah, it's very sad because it's now become the new normal to just see people getting shot. There's no longer a shock value in anything. And it gets so repetitive, and you're just starting to not feel when people used to rebel against news like that. They don't want that kind of graphic stuff. And now it's just like, oh yeah, it's just the news.
And we're dulled. Our senses are dulled from it all. I think that's very true.
Now that's the true horror right there.
We agree.
Yeah, that's a scary story of all of them.
Yeah, the real terror.
So what's next for you? What are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on a couple of different projects. One is called The Cult. It's a very interesting kind of book that I'm doing. It's fiction. The other one that I'm doing is called The Shopkeeper of Salerno, and that's also fiction, but it's based on an account that was shared with me by a tourist who happened to visit a small village in Italy. And they had to stay there simply because they missed the tour bus, went on to miss the train, and what happened to them in the next 2 weeks was just unbelievable. So needless to say, they're not going back to Italy anytime soon after what happened to them.
That sounds super awesome. Interesting. We want to let people know about your website. I'm going to bring
it's really cool. You got a great
screen.
website.
You do. Did you
build
the website yourself, or did you have it done?
I actually had a virtual assistant do the website, and she periodically updates it as soon as I have like a new release. But I have all 6 books now up on there. And if you click on the book cover, it directs you direct to Amazon. So it's really not a separate portal for sales per se. It just takes you directly to Amazon. There's a short description for each book. I also have a page for periodic updates. I have a little blog. Trying to think what else I have put in there recently. Oh, it's just a page talking a little bit about my background. And
Oh,
there's
that's
the
cool.
blog.
Some
Yeah.
different stories on there. A ufologist, an experiencer, the nun of Merseyside.
WWII.
Love it. Very cool. Very cool. And I only asked about whether you did it because we need to fix ours.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay. Don't
yeah.
suffer. It's
I can
terrible.
email you her email address, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, she travels all over the world and just takes her laptop with her. She goes with her husband wherever he goes, she goes, and she works remotely.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's a good gig right there.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing.
Absolutely. And yep, there's some podcast appearances, and I know you'll probably have our show up there immediately as soon as we end. No, I'm kidding. It's been great talking to you.
Again, thank you.
We really enjoy it. We love your stories.
Thank you. Thank you
they
for
are-
having me on.
They're true stories of the paranormal, and they really are. You know, some of them are kind of like that classic tale, like the house that need a repair, but you add things to your books, and they're real life accounts. Then not Hollywood, and they're fantastic.
Yes,
we love them.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us. We're just going to wrap things up. We'll be right back.
Good night.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for tonight. We hope you enjoy Veterans Day. It's being celebrated tomorrow around here, or Monday in some areas.
Yes,
I think it's early Saturday. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. We'll see you guys next week. I think Chris Garcia is coming on next week to do some live psychic readings. So that'll be a lot of fun. He hasn't been on in a long time. Till then, stay safe. Have a good weekend.
Bye,
We'll
guys.
see you
Thank
soon.
you.